right, folks, welcome back to Getting in a College Coach Conversation. We just talked all about Working Parents Day. We've got a couple of working parents here on this final segment, and we've got some questions from probably some working parents as well. We're going to power through as many of these as we can because, as I mentioned at the opening of the show, we got a ton of questions that came in over Labor Day weekend. I think people are starting to say, I need more. So we want to get through a lot of stuff today. We're going to start with a finance question, and joining me as always to represent the financial aid expertise of our team, we've got Shannon Vasconcelos, who will be fielding the finance questions. Hey, Shannon.
Hey, Ian.
I almost forgot to introduce you. We're just in such a rush here to get through the questions. Okay.
Finance robot reporting for duty. Let's get to these.
So we've got Rob, who is from Texas, who asked this question. When over-awarded outside scholarships, I would guess it's whenever awarded outside scholarships for a student with no need-based aid, what are some appeal positions to take to increase our cost of attendance number to avoid displacement or having scholarship checks returned? Oh, he does mean over-awarded.
So he does mean over-awarded,
So when you get too much in outside scholarship money to cover the cost of attendance, how can you raise the cost of attendance? That is such an interesting question that I never thought I would hear. So what's your answer?
Yeah, so this happens, it's not uncommon when we usually talk about it in relation to need-based financial aid, where it is a government regulation where that a student cannot be awarded need-based aid in excess of their calculated financial need. And that is a law. If a college tells you, sorry, we have to reduce some financial aid to make room for this outside scholarship, they have no wiggle room there. This is a slightly different situation with Rob where he hasn't been awarded any need-based aid. So it sounds to me like Rob is in a great situation in that he or his child has been awarded probably a full scholarship by the college that covers everything. And then they also got an outside scholarship from an outside organization, and the college is telling them, we're going to have to reduce your giant merit scholarship because we're not going to give you more money than what you actually need to attend this university. You know, maybe this school costs $50,000. We were going to give you 50, but since you're getting $5,000 from somebody else, we're only going to give you 45. That it's not a law that they have to do that. So you're in a slightly better negotiating position there, Robin, that the school can do whatever they want. They have a policy that they're going to reduce their merit scholarship, but they don't have to. Now, what you can do, it sounds like you already know, since they're saying we're not going to give you scholarship funding in excess of your cost of attendance, can we convince the school that your actual cost of attendance is larger than what they think it is, so you can keep more of your scholarship money? Now, what goes into the cost of attendance there's a sort of a few different buckets: tuition and fees. Usually standardized, kind of across the board, every student is charged the same. But if you have any extra costs in there that the average student does not, often happens for science majors that might have extra lab fees in there, you can appeal to the school and say, hey, can you add my lab fee on? If that's $300, that's an extra $300 that now you get to keep if they increase your cost of attendance budget. And it's not increasing your actual costs at all. It's just the budget that they are looking at. Room and board is another one. Again, the college is going to include, it's sort of a standardized cost of attendance budget for everybody, or everybody in the same class, or everybody in the same living situation. So they're including the cost maybe of the average dorm. Are you living in a more deluxe dorm, or you're a single room instead of a double room? You can increase the cost of attendance budget for that. Do you have a higher meal plan than what they're charging the typical student? If you're living off campus, or is your off-campus rent more expensive than what the average student has? So what you're going to want to do is find out what budget they are using, what are the numbers for all these components, and see if your numbers, you can justify that your numbers are higher anywhere. Also included books and supplies. Are your books more expensive than typical? Do you need to buy a computer, which they may or may not have incorporated into their standard budget? Is your computer, because of what your major is, you have to get a fancier computer? They could increase the budget for that. Transportation, what are you paying for parking or public transportation? Kind of all of that stuff. Find out what numbers they're using. You can ask the financial aid office what your cost of attendance budget is the breakdown and find out if you are paying more anywhere. If so, you can ask them to increase your budget, and that will allow you to keep more of your scholarship funding.
It sounds like me trying to get free shipping on a website. Just add more stuff to the cart. I gotta get over 100.
100%, yes. So in that case, you're actually increasing your cost because you're buying more. Rob, if you have these costs anyway, you're just asking the school to include them.
No, Shannon, I'm saving.
You're saving, right? That's what I tell myself too. Yes.
All right, you've got questions for me.
I do. The first question comes in from Andrew. My son is really interested in medicine as a career, and he plans to major in biology. But we heard that it is harder to get in to medical school if you apply to a really popular major. Actually, I'm not sure. You can tell me what you think. It's asking here. He's interested in a career in medicine, but he plans to major in biology. But we heard that it's harder to get in if you apply to a really popular major. Now he's thinking about doing something more unique, like environmental studies. Will that give him an edge? Can he change his major once he gets in? So I'm actually not sure. Are they asking about it's harder to get into undergrad or harder to get into medical school?
Yeah, I think for medical school, what you major in as an undergrad really doesn't matter. You have to take certain classes in order to be eligible for medical school, and they are typically science courses and quantitative skills courses. So those tend to overlap with science majors, which is why students major in the sciences if they're pre-med. Yes. But you don't have to be any particular major in order to be pre-med. As far as popularity for majors, I think the way to think about it is that there are some special programs that you can apply to for particular schools. But usually if you're looking at majors that are in the same college at a university, there tends to be a lot of fluidity between moving in those spaces, and they actually don't read students by major in those cases. So for example, if you're applying to the College of Letters and Sciences at a university, that college is going to have biology and environmental sciences and philosophy and humanities and English and all of these different majors that are the more traditional liberal arts and sciences majors. And so if you're admitted to that college, you can take whatever of those majors you'd like once you get there. And I think typically the school's pretty agnostic about what you say you want to major in at the point at which you apply, because they know that there's going to be some changing that happens when you get on campus. What you can't count on is an opportunity to transfer between colleges at a university. So if you come in as a biology major and then you decide all of a sudden that you want to do civil engineering, that's really not going to be a channel that's available to you as a student, because that engineering college is its own separate college, its own separate bucket of majors. And those students have been read and reviewed quite differently. So for this specific instance where Andrew's asking about biology versus environmental science, it's not really going to make a difference in any way with respect to the application process at the overwhelming majority of schools. But if we are talking about biomedical engineering versus biology, then I would say, yeah, biology, you'll have an easier time getting in. And I don't think that there's a meaningful difference between those two majors if your goal is medicine. Now, if you change your mind and you want to become an engineer, you won't want to have that biology major. And that's some of the difficulty in making this choice. But I think for Andrew's son, it's really not something that he should spend a lot of time fretting about. Put down whatever you're most interested in now and then see what happens when you get there.
Perfect. The next question comes in from Kristen. And she says, I listen to your podcast every Thursday and we love it. My daughter, who is a senior this coming fall, is filling out the comment app. Do you advise to waive the right to review recommendation letters?
Yes. Waive your right to review your recommendation letters. This is really important. I almost wish that this was airing early, because once you select what you have chosen, you actually can't change it in the Common App. It's the one thing that once you click it and then you sign it electronically, you can't go back and update it. The reason this matters so much is because when you waive your right to view a letter of recommendation, essentially what you're saying is, I trust whatever my teachers and counselor are going to say about me. So I'm going to ask them to write letters of recommendation, and then it's in their hands and I approve their testimonial. If you do not waive your right, you're saying, I might want to review those things. And what that means is that implicitly, potentially those teachers or counselors are holding back to some extent because they don't want to put something on paper that the student can then ask to see through the FERPA Act, the Federal Educational Rights and Privacies Act. So I always tell students, waive your right. If you're not comfortable waiving your right, you might want to choose different teachers to write your letters of
Right.
recommendation. You probably shouldn't be concerned about what that content is going to share. This is a legal button that needs to be clicked on the application. And I think if you screwed up and you did not waive your right, I don't think it's going to be a big issue in the process. But if you have not yet clicked that button, please waive your rights, and that will allow your letters of rec to be much more transparent.
Perfect. And Kristen actually had a follow-up question about a different letter of recommendation,
awesome.
or one of the letters of recommendation. This one from her daughter's guidance counselor, who happened to have left her position over the summer. And now a different guidance counselor is going to be writing her daughter's guidance counselor letter of recommendation. And this is a bit concerning to Kristen. This other guidance counselor doesn't know her, and shouldn't the old one have written the letter before she left? What insight do you have on this?
This happens all the time. Yeah. So I get this question a lot. I first of all, I just want to say, if you have a teacher in 11th grade who leaves your school, who retires or goes to another school, and you wanted that teacher to write your letter of recommendation, you can still follow up with that teacher separately. You can go and ask them to write the letter. They were your teacher for a full year in that capacity. They can give that testimonial for your college application. With guidance counselors, it's a little different because they have to be in that role currently, because their responsibility is to put together your transcript, to fill out the secondary school report, etc. Many guidance counselors, especially ones that are new, are going to take some time to get to know the student, either in a meeting or even in having conversations with teachers. That said, if you know your counselor really well for a couple of years and then they leave, there's no way that your new counselor is going to know you as well as that departing counselor will. What you have to do as the applicant is really trust the process, right? So you trust that the new counselor will probably say, I'm new at this school, and so I'm still learning this class. This is what I know about this student. And the admission officer who receives it will not have outsized expectations for the content of that letter. They're not going to expect it to be, I've known this student forever and they're so wonderful. It's probably going to be a paragraph. It'll be fairly short. What that means is that your teacher letters of recommendation become more important as a share of your recommendations, because those people do know you for that full year. So Shannon, it was really remarkable reading applications, the massive, massive difference between counselor letters from students at really big public high schools and counselor letters at small, independent, private high schools.
Yeah.
The small school letters were, 10-point font, full page, single space with quotes from teachers. They're written by committee. They're these beautiful, eloquent, you get to learn the students super well. And the public school is, this kid has got all A's and is really involved in stuff, and we're excited to endorse their candidacy. As an admission officer, I did not hold that against the student, because it's a structural difference about where they go to school. It has nothing to do with them as a student. So context. This is another instance. If you lose that counselor and a new one comes in, it's just another contextual difference in the situation.
Yeah, I think the average school student to school counselor ratio in the US is like 1 to 400 some. So, your daughter will not be alone in having a counselor, a letter come from a counselor who does not know her particularly well.
That's right.
It would be the case probably with most students. Next question comes in from Christine. What changes or accommodations will be made in the 2024 cycle by selective but not super selective private and public colleges due to the pandemic years? Wow, I feel like we could do a whole show on this, Ian. What do you got in 2 minutes?
I was trying to count on my hand, because it's the 2024 cycle means that those are seniors who are graduating in 2024. So we got 2024, 23 is their senior year, 22, 23 junior, 21, 22, and then 2021 is their freshman year. So those students, when they started high school, were probably in a situation where they were remote learning. But by sophomore year, most schools are back to that normal kind of in-person counseling or teaching situation. And so I actually perceive things to get almost back to normal in terms of the review process by 2024. There are very few students that are doing things outside of the classroom in 9th grade that are making a meaningful impact on their application. And I think colleges tend not to look super carefully at 9th grade grades anyway. So this is a situation where next year, 10th grade will be back in person. That's really where a lot of schools will start their assessments, and will be closer to the traditional application process than I think we have been since the pandemic started.
Awesome. Do we have,
We have
time for one more? How about
give me that quick
Mike's?
one. Yeah.
Yeah. How much of an advantage is early decision 1 versus early decision 2 for a competitive school in terms of admissions?
There really isn't on paper a difference in those advantages, but I think if you are planning to apply ED to that particular school, go for ED1, because they have all of the space available at that point. For ED2, some subset of that space has been taken up by their ED1 admits. So if their ED1 pool is really strong, they're not going to need as much from ED2. If their ED1 pool is really weak, they might need more from ED2, but you don't know exactly how that's going to shake out. So you always want to apply earlier if possible. If you're planning to apply to one school ED1 and a second school ED2, you're kind of forced into that situation regardless. You don't need to worry about it. If you don't get into your ED1 choice, you still do have ED2 on the table. In my experience, I perceived the ED2 pool at Reed, where we had ED2, to be weaker. And so it was actually a little bit easier to get in ED2. But I think we were also kind of wary of scraping the barrel. So we had to be cautious of how we were looking at those students. The ED1 kids were the ones that we were really, really excited about. For the ED2's kids, they waited a little bit. And so it kind of showed in some of their materials. And we say, yeah, there's some typos here. And it just feels like the effort's not quite there. Let's defer them, and we'll look at them in the regular round and see how it shakes out. So,
right. But that was the quality of their application, not the fact that they applied ED2.
That's right. That's right. I think for a student who is similarly competitive in ED2 would have had the same advantage as a student applying in ED1. And maybe you look even stronger in the ED2 pool, but that's not a risk that I would take given what I said about how that pool fills in ED1. Shannon, I think that's the most questions we have ever answered.
We did good.
In one segment. We're just like, just knock them down, man. Thanks for helping to drive such wonderful efficiency on the show, as always, and for your expertise. Really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
All right, folks, we are coming back next week with another really wonderful episode of Getting in a College Coach Conversation. I believe that Beth Heaton will be back hosting the show. So if you are missing her for whatever reason, I can understand. You'll be very glad to have her back. The show is going to cover Naviance and using it to its full potential, why colleges even have supplements, what that's for. And then we'll talk about the federal student loan program updates, including loan forgiveness. So a timely segment in that regard. Meanwhile, have a wonderful week, and we will see you back here next week. Take care.